Okay, let's jump right in. We're going back in time, all the way to the year 1010. And what you've got is this incredible setup. In the south, the massive Song dynasty. To the north, the powerful Liu dynasty. And in this single year, we get this amazing story of joy, of brutal war, and a huge shift in how civilization itself works.
So let's start in the capital of the Song dynasty, because a party is about to break out, a celebration that will literally secure the future of an entire empire.
You have to understand, for Emperor Zhenzong, this was absolutely everything. He was 42 years old, and five of his previous sons had tragically died young. The weight of the whole empire was on his shoulders. See, an emperor's number one job was to keep the family line going. So this wasn't just a happy family moment, it was a massive political victory. The dynasty was safe. And his reaction? It's just so wonderfully human. When he got the news, he was in the middle of a super formal meeting. The story goes, he just jumps up, blurts out this exact phrase, and literally runs out of the room. He comes back a minute later with his pockets stuffed full of gold coins, and he's just pressing them into the hands of this confused official, like a giddy new dad handing out cigars. It's such a rare, personal glimpse of the actual guy under the crown. Okay, so while the champagne corks are flying in the Song capital, a totally different story is playing out up north. Their big rival, the Liao dynasty, is in the middle of this huge invasion of the Korean kingdom of Goryeo. And this contrast is really the heart of our story. One empire is celebrating new life, while the other is dealing out death. And the reason why is what's so fascinating. To really get this war, you have to try and see it from the Liao's point of view. You have to understand the strategic nightmare that these big land-based empires are living with every single day. So the Liao emperor marches on Goryeo with an army of 400,000 soldiers. Now, just to put that number in perspective, that is double the size of the army he used against the super powerful Song dynasty just a few years earlier. This was a lion pouncing on a mouse. Why on earth would you need that much force? And this is where the story gets really weird. So the Liao army marches in, they capture the capital city, and they burn it right to the ground. A total crushing victory, right? Well, not exactly. On their way back home, they get ambushed over and over and suffer these huge losses. And the result of all this? The political situation snaps right back to exactly how it was before the war. So the real question is, why would you fight a horrible, expensive war for nothing? The answer lies in this concept from international relations called the security dilemma. And it's actually a really simple but really dangerous trap. The steps you take to make yourself feel safe, building a bigger army, putting up walls, make your neighbor feel unsafe. So what do? They arm up, which of course makes you feel even less safe. It's this vicious spiral of suspicion that can drag everyone into a war that nobody actually wanted in the first place. The German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck had the perfect way to describe this. It's that constant, nervous feeling. You can never truly know what your neighbor is thinking, so you have to prepare for the worst. One guy reaches into his pocket for a handkerchief, and you're already reaching for your gun. That's the paranoid world of a land-based empire. And this was exactly the Liao's logic. They had just made peace with the Song on their southern border, so, like checking things off a list, they turned their attention east. Goryeo was friendly with their enemy, the Song, and for the Liao, having an unpredictable, possibly hostile neighbor on their flank was a threat that they felt just had to be dealt with. The war wasn't about getting rich, it was about fear.
Okay, so that explains why the Liao were so aggressive. But what about Goryeo? Why didn't this much smaller kingdom just give up? Why not save themselves from all that death and destruction?
I mean, just look at the numbers here. It is a complete mismatch. The Liao Empire was 20 times bigger, with more than 4 times the people. By any logical measure, Goryeo was totally outgunned. Fighting back shouldn't just be hard, it should have been absolute suicide. And here's the real head-scratcher. This wasn't about some kind of stubborn pride. Goryeo had no problem bowing to a bigger power. In fact, they had already declared themselves a vassal of the Song dynasty. So why bend the knee to the faraway Song, but refuse to do the same for the terrifying Liao who were right on their doorstep? And the answer is just incredible. It's written down in the last will and testament of Goryeo's founding king. He basically hard-coded this deep cultural contempt for the Lao, the Khitans he called them, right into his kingdom's DNA. He saw Goryeo as the true heir to civilization, and he saw the Lao as nothing more than uncultured barbarians. So it meant they were willing to submit to a superior power, sure, just not to a power they saw as culturally inferior. But this whole conflict, it wasn't just about these two kingdoms. It was actually a symptom of a massive shift that was happening all across East Asia.
By the time we get to the 11th century, a truly multipolar world had shown up. Yeah, you still had the big superpowers, the Song and the Liao, but they weren't the only ones on the field anymore. Now you had this ring of stubborn, tough little kingdoms surrounding them, from Goryeo in the east to Shixia and Dali in the west, and every single one of them had its own agenda.
That old model, one giant empire in the middle that calls all the shots, was basically gone. These surrounding peoples had been watching and learning. They built their own stable governments, their own strong institutions. But the real game changer? They started developing their own unique written languages. And a unique script creates a unique identity, a kind of cultural gravity that makes a people so much harder to just conquer and absorb.
And this brings us to what I think is a really beautiful way of rethinking this whole period of history. It's not really a story about decline, but about transformation.
A lot of times, history books will frame this as the Great Tang Dynasty collapsing and the Song being this kind of weaker replacement. But that's not how the people living through it saw it at all. Powers like the Liao and the Sixia didn't see themselves as destroying a civilization. They saw themselves as its rightful heirs. They each felt they were carrying the torch, claiming their piece of the Tang legacy.
There's this modern Chinese saying that just captures this idea perfectly. The Tang Dynasty was that ball of fire, a single, bright, concentrated center of civilization. But when it fell, the fire didn't go out. It scattered into a sky full of stars, with each of these new kingdoms becoming its own point of light, carrying that cultural DNA of the Tang in its own unique way.
And that feeling, that sense of a stable, unified world suddenly shattering into a million pieces, that's a universal human experience. It echoes almost 900 years later, in the words of the Austrian writer Stefan Zweig. When he was describing the collapse of his own world in Europe before World War I, he used almost the exact same image. A beautiful world smashed to pieces. He truly believed that the world of security was gone for good. But here's where you see the incredible cycle of history. Zweig was so broken by the disintegration he saw that he took his own life in 1942, completely unable to imagine what was coming next. Because just 10 years after his death, the very first steps were taken to create the European Union, an unprecedented project of integration, built literally on the ruins of that shattered world.
And that, I think, is the thought to leave you with. History seems to suggest that these periods of great disintegration, of shattering, chaos, and conflict are very often just the prelude to a new and maybe even stronger form of unity. After the ball of fire, you get a sky full of stars. And after the stars, well, maybe you get a whole new dawn,